Only, it wasn't very scary. Maybe the birds were only scared away when something was moving.
Ajde se legni, bit će ti lakše kad ležiš.
That was it.
Legni se, bit će ti lakše dok
But
ležiš.
how
Tako
could
ćeš
he
da
get it to
zaspiš
move?
i brže će da ti prođe.
He also needed more seeds.
Meda?
Seeds
Hoćeš
were
medu?
easy. Making a scarecrow
Hoćeš
move
medu?
was hard.
A ti se pokaži, gledaj George i zagrli tog
I heard
muzicu.
a guy named Quixote opened a new bakery up ahead. Hungry?
It was the biggest pinwheel George had ever seen.
Pretty neat, huh?
It's a windmill.
Yep. It grinds my grain for me. Let me show you how it works. When the wind blows, it pushes the sails, just like wind pushes a sailboat along the water. But since sails are attached to the mill, instead of moving forward, they spin around. Some people use windmills to make electricity.
Jes mislim da on pametan
I
majmun.
use mine to make flour.
Głupie.
And
Myślę, że jedzą ovome.
Well, I'll be. What do you think, George?
On se učinilo da je pametan.
that's the butter churner.
Myślę, że jedzą ovo.
Those stones grind the grain into flour for bread. Bread
Ne,
and
verujem ja
butter
da
go
on to
together
misli.
like,
Možeš si ti to misliti.
well,
Widziała tu njegovi lik.
Kako smo... Aha.
To tako.
That is
Kada
pretty
se
amazing.
tiče da unutra voda, ali htjeli su da kažu da u
I didn't
onom
know a windmill could do that.
you could use a windmill to move just about anything.
Dobro.
Yes,
I?
this one's a peppermint.
A on je to visi.
That was it. George could use a windmill to make his scarecrow move. And George's garden could finally grow. He was going to need a bigger windmill. Luckily, George knew a perfect place for finding things. The recycling room. Now, what did Mr. Coyote say? If you're building a windmill, you need sails. A sturdy base. Something for the sails to spin around, and something to make the scarecrow move. Now that he had the windmill parts, he just had to put them together. Time to take those sails for a spin. And his windmill stopped short. So George gave his windmill a leg up. 4 of them.
Ne zna
Make your
zašto.
windmill. It's easy to get wrapped up in your work.
Let's do
So
the
George gave his sails a
mama.
trim.
Misliš ne možeš beto da ih okrene? No.
His sails moved,
E sad bez daleki.
what was he missing?
When the wind blows, it pushes the sails.
And then George realized these were too loose. So he got more sticks and attached the sails with tape. George could push his sails, but the wind couldn't. Mr. Coyote's sails were stiff. Maybe that gave the wind more to push against. So George made his sails stiff. All his windmill needed now was a scarecrow over. At last, his windmill was finished. And it was a good thing, too.
Huh?
Because he was out of tape. Now he just had to wait for the wind. And get a weight for his windmill. Done it. He made his scarecrow move. But he did feel bad for Compass and his friends. Now the pigeons could eat their food while George grew his. Summer was almost over. George and the man with the yellow hat came home from the park happy, tired.
Posle
Guys,
ideš
have fun in the sun?
spusti sutra kad spavaš.
We played an extra long game of sorry I didn't mean to kick that over your head.
Pa na ovu stranu se okrenem s dupetom da ti dođeš.
That was probably our last game of the summer. Summer's over, George. The weather will be turning cold soon.
We'll find out exactly how soon tomorrow on Whistle Pig Wednesday. You've never heard of Whistle Pig Wednesday, George? Here, Mr. Glass wrote this book about it.
Yes, that's a whistle pig. Are you hinting you want to read that now? Do you know about Groundhog Day? Well, groundhogs hibernate. That means they sleep from fall to spring, all through winter. They don't live in houses like us. They live in burrows, which are holes they dig underground. On February 2nd, the groundhog wakes up and looks outside. If it sees its shadow, it goes back to sleep. If because winter will last 6 more weeks. Around here, we call groundhogs whistle pigs. Since we didn't call them groundhogs, we couldn't have Groundhog Day. Back when Mr. Glass was 7 years old, he met Sherry Whistlepig in Endless Park. They had a fun day. The next day was the last Wednesday in August, and he went to her home, which was a burrow in the park. Sherry saw her shadow and got scared. She started hibernating right away. Young Mr. Glass noticed the weather turned cool that very day. It was the start of fall. So Mr. Glass created Whistlepig Wednesday. Since then, he goes to the park very early on the last Wednesday of every August and brings his friend Sherry out to check her shadow. If she sees her shadow, summer is over. It's like Groundhog Day, except it's about when summer ends.
That was the kind of story that makes a monkey think about shadows. How come George's shadow didn't predict when the seasons changed? Was a Whistlepig shadow different from a monkey shadow? Aren't all shadows the same? Can you lose your shadow? Now he had two shadows to compare. They both looked the same, except one was shaped like a monkey and the other a dachshund. George explained that both shadows moved over stuff the same way, and neither one predicted the weather. But Honey had a dog shadow. To see if a Whistlepig shadow was different, he needed to see a Whistlepig shadow. He never really noticed the shadow before. It looked different. Logically, if you want to call a Whistlepig, you'd whistle. Now we could compare shadows. Except she had no shadow at all. George had no shadow either. Because the sun was behind a cloud. She didn't come out, but now he knew where she lived. So he'd just come back early tomorrow and be here when she came out for Whistlepig Wednesday. When George came back, the sun was barely up. And Sherry wasn't up at all. He got in position so she couldn't get out without him.